Good afternoon. I'm Helena Pugh. I'm the Executive Director and founder of Zahara Veterans Network Incorporated. In this Saturday, I'm hijacking the post to have a topic about a discussion that has been impactful to the woman veteran community. And that topic is domestic violence. The woman veteran community has a tendency to be very silent on topics, even topics that are impactful to us or harmful to us. We won't speak out about them. So today I want to take a few moments on Saturday, this Saturday post, the Saturday post, to discuss domestic violence, how to identify if you are in a relationship that is domestically violent, and some practical steps that you can take to put in place to protect yourself. So I made some notes for today, so I'm going to be reading from them. I'm also going to make a few references that you may want to write down. I'm also going to post within the comments of this feed or this social media post some of the links for the federal agencies that you can go to pull and look up and see what their policies are as it relates to domestic violence. So I'm doing this because in 2018, I can personally recall the circumstances of 4 separate service members who were killed as a result of domestic violence while on active duty. And those women are Claire, who was in the U.S. Navy, Andrea, who was in the U.S. Navy, Brittany, who was in the United States Army, and Natasha, who was a United States Marine. Semper Fidelis Tofaholden. So today's discussion is for not simply our active duty service members and our veterans who are women, but also for those who are men. This is a conversation and a topic or a discussion that's probably been long overdue. And since so many of us are using social media, I'm going to post this video within some of our private social groups so that we can at least start the discussion. Now, I will try and comment in some of the comments below, but I know for a fact I'm not going to be able to comment on every post. And also, I do not use Facebook. I only have a Facebook page for the purpose of running the business page. If you do have questions for me or you want to contact me, you must do so through LinkedIn. That is the only social media post that I am taking private questions or comments, or if you need additional supportive services, you can always go to our organization's website of zvnet.org or the new website address of ZaharaVets.org. So now let's get into the topic. For those service members or veterans who are in a relationship that is impacted by or controlled by domestic violence, domestic abuse, or restrictive domestic relations, I'm going to give you my best advice. You need to get out of the relationship. And here's why. In 2018, November of 2018, CBS ran a report, and I want to read what it said. It stated that more than half of all the women who were killed worldwide in 2017 were murdered by family members or partners. Let that sink in for a minute. The Center for Domestic Abuse cited that more than 12 million men and women in the United States are victims of domestic violence or abuse. So now women, in 2017, the women who were murdered, more than worldwide, not just in the U.S., but worldwide, more than half of them were killed by a family member or partner. That means they were most likely murdered by someone who they trusted, who they loved, and in a lot of instances, they had probably been intimate with. Their love of that person did not prevent that person from murdering them. So there is no situation, no relationship where you can love a person enough to where they will stop hitting you. If you do not leave a relationship that is impacted by domestic violence or domestic abuse, there is a good possibility that you will become one of those statistics. How much do you value yourself? How much do you value your life? And your life as it impacts those around you, not simply that person. So this really has become a topic or come up for me because I recently read an email from an active duty service person who wrote that they were in a domestic violence situation and that they informed their sexual assault prevention representative for their unit, and they were told that because it was not a sexual assault, they could not be assisted. So I want to delve into that for a minute. I have notes because I said I didn't want to forget anything. So the first thing I did after reading the email that came over from this person, and I didn't state whether it was a male or a female, but it was a person who was on active duty who did in fact report that they were in an abusive relationship. And I want to read, first thing I did after I saw that was I went and I pulled up what the Department of Defense has to say about domestic assault or domestic abuse or domestic violence. And I want to read for you the actual Department of Defense definition for both of those situations. Domestic abuse is a pattern of behavior resulting in emotional, psychological abuse, economic control, and/or interference with personal liberty that is directed toward a person who is a current or former spouse, a person with whom the abuser shares a child in common, or a current or former intimate partner with whom the abuser shares or has shared a common domicile. Next, domestic violence. The Department of Defense defines domestic violence as the use, attempted use, or threatened use of force or violence against a person, or a violation of a lawful order issued for the protection of a person who is a current or former spouse, a person with whom the abuser shares a child in common, or a current or former intimate partner with whom the abuser shares or has shared a common domicile. That means you have to have lived in the same residence as that person, where you and that person received mail, where you and that person commonly shared bills. It is that you and that person live together. And that's really important for service members, particularly active duty service members, and I'm going to tell you why. If you are a woman and you are on active duty in the military, but the person that you are having or in an abusive relationship with is not in the military, you do not have a child with that person, you have not been married to that person, or you do not live with that person, the Department of Defense's description and definition of domestic abuse and domestic violence prevents them, in some instances, from being able to assist you. So if the person that you are in the relationship with is abusive and the person is not in the military, you are not married to them, you do not share a child with them, and you have never lived with them, you need to report that abuse to your local law enforcement officials. You don't necessarily have to report that to your command or the Department of Defense because their definition does not cover the relationship that you are in. And that's really important to know because in the letter, the person said that the sexual assault prevention person wasn't willing to help them. But in some situations, we are, as service members and veterans, reporting instances of sexual abuse to authorities or agencies who don't have a legal obligation to assist us. So the first thing you need to do is make sure that you are reporting the relationship to the right source. So if your person that you're dating or in the domestic violence situation with is not another service member, they are simply a civilian, and that you are not married to them, you have no children with them, and you have never cohabitated with them, the correct reporting agency would be to your local law enforcement, the law enforcement agency where you reside. If you live on base, then it would be the county or the area or the city or town where that base is located. You need to let your local law enforcement know, and then we'll go over some other steps that you should be taking to protect yourself on the active duty service member side. But I wanted to point that out. So after I read that person's email and I went and I read the Department of Defense's official statement on domestic abuse and domestic violence, I also read the Navy's OPNAV instructions 1752.1 Charlie, which is the Navy Sexual Assault Prevention and Response Program. That program was very clear. It is for the purpose of addressing issues that are related to sexual assault. That's not the correct place necessarily to report your instance of domestic abuse. Your domestic abuse would be covered underneath OPNAV instruction 1752 TAC or dot 2 Bravo, which is the Family Advocacy Program. That is where the domestic abuse situations are covered. But again, if that relationship is with someone who is a non-military person and you've never had a child with them, you're not married to them, and you've never lived with them, then reporting it to either of those agencies just doesn't make sense because they're not governed by those agencies. So now that we've talked about the definitions as related to the Department of Defense and what the Navy's instructions are as relates to reporting either sexual assault or using the correct domestic violence reporting of Family Advocacy Program, which the Family Advocacy Program handles domestic violence as well as child abuse charges, so you should know that. Go out there and take a look at those instructions. You all are service members. They're out there for you to review and be familiar with. So knowing and understanding the differences in those programs is not a simple matter of waiting for the sexual assault brief that we're going to have that's maybe 20 or 30 minutes or an hour long, however long they are nowadays, and that's all you have to do as relates to sexual assault prevention or understanding domestic violence. You're the service member. The responsibility of knowing these instructions falls on you. So that's first, and next I want to say that for the letter that I read where the person stated that the sexual assault prevention reporting person told them that they weren't able to assist because it wasn't a sexual assault, it's to say that that person might have been right. Now, could that person have given them the information about where the reporting for domestic violence is related to? Yes. Did they have to? No. At the end of the day, the responsibility of knowing which reporting agency is the correct one to report to falls on the service member, which is why I'm giving you these instructions so that you guys will know in the future for yourselves and for other people. And that's specifically related to the Navy. Remember this. Each branch of the military service will have their own instructions and their own special agencies with their own acronyms and special meanings where you need to follow the protocol and or your chain of commands instructions on how to report domestic violence. But what I don't want is for women service members and veterans to continue to hold their commands responsible for situations that weren't reported properly. It begins with proper reporting and going to the correct agency. So know who covers the instances of domestic violence and where that reporting takes place. There's a couple of women that are going to be in these different groups on social media that know exactly what that chain of command is. You need to get with these ladies, get inside these groups, and find out what the proper order is. But let's talk a little bit more about domestic abuse, because I think it's important for us to understand knowing and recognizing when we're in a domestic abuse situation. Because one of the other things that the letter mentioned that was a little disturbing to me as a woman was that the comment read something along the lines of they believed they were in a domestic violence relationship. Well, there isn't an agency that I know of that can operate off of your belief. If you go to an agency and state you believe that you were in a domestic violence situation, then when that belief is confirmed, you can come back and ask for help. But most agencies can't operate off of your belief. You need to be able to articulate and clearly state that you are a victim of domestic violence. You simply believing doesn't give any agency permission to do anything on your behalf to assist you. And you need to know that. So now I want to read from my notes so that I don't get lost. If you make statements like, I think I'm in, or the relationship is not that violent, or he or she really hasn't done anything, they just make me feel uneasy, then you haven't given the agency that you're reporting to or the officers that you're reporting to anything that they can technically move on. So it would be difficult for any agency to assist you. And so you are not what I call a civilian alien. It's a whole lot of civilian aliens out here and on this veteran side of things. I am absolutely, and that's my word, I'm making it up, the civilian aliens, they are just too much. They are undisciplined. They have no decorum. There's a lot of things we can say about why assimilating into the civilian world is challenging, but for the most part, it's the civilian aliens. We know that. But you're not them. When you raised your right hand and promised to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, you were sent through a series of trainings to make sure that you understood how to assess and identify threats to our nation. I want you to take what you learned in those trainings and apply them to yourself. Your gut will tell you when you're in a relationship with someone that does not respect you. Your gut will tell you, and your training will identify to you when someone is attempting or executing harm on your person. You are not a civilian alien. You have the tools, the trainings, and the ability to determine whether or not a relationship that you are in is in fact harmful or dangerous to your health. There are no more excuses that I want women veterans or women service members to take as it relates to our safety. There are women, as the CNN report stated, more than half the women worldwide who died in 2017 were killed by someone that they trusted, that was a family member, or that they were in a relationship with. So trying to give people the benefit of the doubt when your gut is telling you that someone is in fact dangerous or harmful to you is not in your best interest. You need to separate and get out of those relationships. So I know and understand that some of our service members are younger, and maybe you haven't had a lot of life experience, and you're not quite sure what's taking place in these relationships. So I want to take a few moments to discuss what a relationship that is impacted by either domestic abuse, domestic violence, or domestic restriction feels like and looks like. So I pulled this from WebMD, and I want to tell you the sources that I pulled it from because I want you guys to go out there and take a look. So WebMD has some information out there that's related to domestic abuse and domestic violence. So if you're not sure if you are in a domestic violence situation, I want you to ask yourself some of these questions. First, are you afraid of your partner? If you have the thought in your mind when you go to say something to them that you're either scared to say it, you're concerned about what they will do if you tell them, if you're afraid to talk to them about certain topics because you're afraid of them either harming you or harming someone else, then that would be an indicator that you are in a relationship with someone who is either domestically violent or prone to domestic abuse. Some of the other things that WebMD says, if your partner bullies, threatens, or controls you, if they often accuse you of having affairs, if they blame you for the abuse after they have abused you, whether they're slapping you, shaking you, hitting you, if they later then blame you for those instances, you may be you are in a relationship that is impacted by domestic abuse and violence. If the person criticizes you, if they tell you what to wear and how you should look, if they threaten to kill you or someone else, particularly if the person is close to you or attempting to get close to you, if they throw things or punch at walls or other things or people when they're angry, if they yell at you or they make you feel small, then you are in fact involved in a relationship with someone who is domestically violent and or domestically abusive. If the person that you're in a relationship with controls the cash and credit cards and keeps them from you as a way of controlling you, if they put you on an allowance and make you explain where every dollar is spent, if they keep you from working certain jobs, or they choose where you can or how often you can work, if they steal from you in order to prevent you from going out or being around other people, and if they won't let you have money for basic needs like food and clothing, then it's quite possible that you're in a relationship with someone who is either domestically abusive or already committing domestically violence. So it says if your partner physically abuses you, so if they abandon you in places that you don't know and tell you how, make you get home on your own, if they attack you with weapons, if they keep you from eating, sleeping, or getting medical care, if they lock you in or out of the house, if they punch you, push you, kick you, bite you, or pull your hair, those are all instances of domestic violence. It also goes on to say if they force you to have sex, if they make you dress in a sexual way and you don't feel comfortable with that, if they make you feel like you have to have sex with them because you're in the relationship with them, if they try to, or if they in fact transmit a sexually transmitted disease or infection to you, then you are in a relationship that is impacted by domestic abuse or domestic violence. So for those of us who have friends or peers that we think are being abused, WebMD goes on to state that some signs to know if someone you know is being abused is if they make excuses for injuries that they have, if their personality changes, if they have extremely low self-esteem but they were originally confident or outgoing and lively and they become sullen or remorse or they're not as engaged as they previously were, if they never have any cash on hand or money on hand or a credit card or debit card to use to make their own purchases, if they're worried about overly pleasing their partner, if they begin skipping out on school, work, or social outings for no clear reason, and if they wear clothes that don't fit in the season, those could all possibly be signs of someone who is being sexually abused or victimized. So I don't want this conversation to simply center or focus on our women. I want to talk about what those signs look like for our brothers in arms, because our brothers experience just as much domestic violence as our women experience. And my brothers in arms, I want to look you dead in the face and I want to tell you what I would tell any woman. If you are in a relationship with someone who transmits a sexually transmitted disease to you, if you're in a relationship with someone who kicks, scratches or bites at you or leaves marks on your skin so that other people can see it, if you're in a relationship with someone who spends money, financially irresponsible, and doesn't understand the emotional or psychological impact to you, the person that you are in a relationship with is in fact domestically abusive and or violent, and you should not be in a relationship with that person. I don't care how good she looks or who her family members are. If she has those type of behaviors, send her back, but separate yourself from someone who is toxic. I don't care if you're a man or a woman. If the person that you are in a relationship with has toxic behavior and that behavior is falling on you and causing you discomfort, you need to separate yourself from that person. So it says, are the signs different for men? I want to read to you from the actual WebMD. And it says, they're often the same, and that's why. And that's true whether the abusive partner is a woman or another man. It may be emotional or verbal, like taking away keys, medicines, or other essentials, or things like constantly putting you down in public or on social media. And it can be physical. To make up for the difference in strength, abusive partners may try to attack you in your sleep, by surprise, with weapons or other objects. They may also abuse your children and or your pets. Now, brothers, I'm not going to say this to you again. I'm going to tell you what the good Lord loves, and that's the truth. If the person that you are with is attacking you in your sleep and using weapons to compensate for their sides against you, that person is domestically violent and you need to get out of the relationship. So now I want to go over to what I want you to do if you have identified that you are in a domestically violent relationship. And I read through some of the different things that were out there, the civilian aliens. They have some great information, but some of the things they say just really don't relate to us as service members. So I want to speak to you from a different mindset, from the mindset of someone who has enjoyed life. And I would not want to spend my life with someone who made life uncomfortable for me. Let me just tell you, even if you live 100 years, your time here on earth is short. You want to be able to live a good life and enjoy the time that you have down here. So consider that when you're thinking about how much time and emotional strain is put on a relationship that is filled with violence, filled with constantly having to explain yourself. If you have to give an excuse for things so that that person doesn't get mad, that's probably a little too much stress and pressure, and it's not very enjoyable. So that's probably not the relationship you need to be in. My steps. And most civilians start with the first step. I'm not a civilian alien. I'm a veteran. And I've been here on earth just a little while. Not that long, but long enough to know that I'm going to start with 0. Because 0 is 0 no higher. You can't go any higher than 0. So before you've even implemented the first step, I want you to do this. If any of the things that I mentioned when I was reading out what the signs of domestic abuse or violence seem like resonated with you, if you thought about the situation you're in and said, you know what, this relationship I'm in is toxic and I probably need to get out of it, then the first thing I want you to do is this. The zero no higher thing I want you to do is this. I want you to find a scripture or words of affirmation to encourage yourself. Because it probably means that you've probably been thinking about the fact that this relationship hasn't been good for you for a while, but you weren't sure what steps to take. Well, don't worry about it. I'm going to give you steps 1 through 6. But before you even start with the 6 steps or the first of the 6 steps, I want you to encourage yourself. And the only way you're going to do that is through the Word of God and through reciting to yourself positive affirmations, so that as we go through these steps, when that person calls, instead of answering the phone, you're going to recite that scripture. When that person calls, instead of answering the phone, you're going to recite that words of affirmation. When that person sends a text and you're trying to figure out how not to respond, you're going to recite this scripture. I want you to build yourself up on the Word of God first. Build yourself up on words that are positive. And if you don't know what words to say, if you don't understand what positive quotes are out there, you're trying to reach and figure out which one will work for you. On Sundays, Zahara Veterans Network posts a sun script, so there's scriptures out there. And on Mondays, we post a Moto Mun quote that's positive and encouraging. So go out there and take a look at what we've already posted. Find yourself one and recite it. Recite it over and over again until you've built up your inner man who is strong enough to follow steps 1 through 6. Now, on to the first step. Because this is the first step that I was surprised the civilians didn't mention. The first thing you do when you have identified that you are in fact in a relationship that is domestically abusive or domestically violent, I want you to end the relationship. You have to end the relationship. You can't ghost the person at this step, because if you ghost them and you try and disappear and you try and move and they're continuously looking for you, the first thing they're going to say when they're asked by law enforcement is, the person never told me that they didn't want me to contact them. So the first thing I want you to do is I want you to end the relationship. I want you to tell them verbally, and I want you to also follow up either through a text or an email and send to them very clearly why you don't want to be in that relationship. And I wrote out a statement that you can follow. Let me find the statement. And I think this is it here. Yeah. So, and this is important because you don't want there to be any confusion about why you don't want to be with that person. You really want it to be clear. You don't want there to be any misunderstanding. So I want you to be able to articulate your complaint of domestic violence or abuse to the other person, and then ultimately, if you need to law enforcement or other agencies. So I want you to tell this person, when I was with you on this day, at this date and time, and this location, you said, you did, or you threatened to do X, Y, and Z. You felt fearful. You're going to tell them, I felt fearful, restricted, threatened, concerned, however you felt, for my health, my safety, my well-being, my parents, my family members, or my friends. You want to let this person know exactly what they said, when they said it, the date they said it, how they, what they said made you feel, how it made you feel, and why you did not want to be around them anymore. So you're going to diffuse the situation. When that person does do something to you that is an act of violence, if you are out into the civilian area, you want to pick up the phone and dial 911. You only want to dial 911 if it is a situation of your life, your limb, or your vision being impacted. That means you are having a confrontation with that person. If the person is not doing anything to you at that moment that is violating your person, instead of dialing 911, I want you to pick up your little phone, go to your search engine, and Google or search for the non-emergency contact number for the policing agency or local law enforcement agency of the place where you are at. And or take yourself to the police station and file a formal complaint. If someone has done something to you that at that very moment isn't threatening to your life, but they do in fact threaten you, or there was a situation of physical assault and they left, then instead of dialing 911, if you can't dial 911, if it's not one of those 911 situations, then go to the police station and file a formal complaint. Call the non-emergency policing number or local law enforcement number so that there's a record of you reporting reporting that instance. What I don't want you to do is to brush it under the rug and do nothing. You're not a civilian alien. You're a trained weapon of mass destruction. And if someone has been violent towards you, threatened you, or done something to you that you know that person could come back and either finish it, or they've made you feel uncomfortable, or you're fearful for your life, you need to report it to someone. So now let's get on to the 6 steps. After you've found the statement and the scripture of with words of positive affirmation to encourage yourself, and you have in fact ended that relationship, the next thing I want you to do is to be able to articulate your situation. I want you to journal it, write it down, tell yourself why you are leaving that person, so that if you ever get the thought in your mind to go back to that person, you can go back to what you have written and remind yourself why you left that situation. Because sometimes when times pass, we forget who the other person was. You say, time heals old wounds. I don't know if that's a good thing when it relates to domestic violence. If they were domestic violent in the past, they can be domestic violent again. So be sure to write down dates, times as these things are happening, so that you understand why you shouldn't be in a relationship with this person. It also will be useful to you if you actually do have to file a complaint against the person. So if you have clearly ended the relationship, you told the person you didn't want the contact, you put that message for them not to contact you in an email or a text message, and you sent it over to them, or you put it in a letter and you sent it through snail mail, then and that person continues to contact you, and if you do need to go to the law enforcement agencies to file a formal complaint, then those different instances that you've written down will help you be able to file your formal complaint. But you will have a hard time filing the complaint if you're just not able to recall specifics about the different incidents that took place. So be sure to document what you are experiencing. The next step is I want you to seek some mentorship. And by mentorship and guidance, I want you to talk to someone who is in your, not necessarily your chain of command, but definitely within your branch of service, or another service that's at least no less than 2 grades above you. Because if you're private and you're taking instructions from a private first class, that's like the blind leading the blind. And I really don't want you to do that. Might be a very intelligent, inspirational PFC, but still a PFC. So I want you to seek guidance from a senior person, and I want you to let them know when you contact them. You're not going to blindside them at the meeting and say, oh, this is about domestic violence. Contact them and let them know, I've been in a relationship and it has some domestic violence in it, or it was domestically abusive, or I had to leave it, and I'm seeking for someone to give me some good information. So you want to let them know that that's what the meeting is going to be about. You might just want to ask them for a coffee or a tea. I am very selective with my time. So to ask someone to come for lunch, and all throughout the lunch for me to have to listen to that's probably not a good thing. So schedule something short, like a 15 to 20 minute lunch or tea, where you really just want to talk to this person. Give them the short, give them the bluff. You Navy folks know what that is. I'm not Navy, but give them the bottom line up front, what occurred, what happened, and what steps you're thinking about taking, and then see what their recommendations are to you. Now, remember what the domestic abuse hotline said. More than 12 million Americans, men and women, are impacted by abuse. So if the person that you seek out the mentorship with is giving you some information that doesn't sit well with your spirit, or your gut is telling you that doesn't sound right, then hey, take it with a grain of salt. That person's word is not God's word, is not the last word, but you did seek them out for advice, so you should be willing to listen to what they had to say and go from what they had to say. So after you've done that, if you need resources, if the person continues to contact you and you need additional resources to figure out how to get them to stop contacting you, or they continue to show up at your home unannounced and uninvited, particularly if you don't live on base and you haven't been in a situation where you lived with that person, then you're going to need to make that complaint formal with your local law enforcement agency. Let me turn my pages. I told you I took notes. The local law enforcement agency will typically have access to local social service resources to direct you to either groups or programs and other type of programs that exist within the community to help you get some help you, one, stand firm in your decision, and also to help you understand what the local law is as it relates to domestic violence in that area, because different states and different counties, they all have different laws. And if you're not familiar with what the local laws are concerning that situation, then you need to know that, particularly if you live off base. So these instructions are really for those who don't live on base. If you live on base, then you already know there are some direct rules and things that you need to follow as it relates to reporting. So additionally, if you have did everything you needed to do with the local law enforcement, you filed the formal complaints, and the person has ceased contact or they're contacting you less, just don't reach back out to them. Don't give them a reason to believe that there's any open door or chance for them to come back in, because if you give them an inch, they're attempt to take a mile. So be very firm in your decision. Once you make the decision that you need to leave, and then put the resources and things in place around you to protect yourself. The next thing I want you to do is think about this. Seek some counsel from your base chaplain. A lot of people forget that the base chaplain is out there. They forget that the bases hold services most every single week. So talk to your base chaplain, and if the base chaplain has a packed schedule, is not able to meet with you, then reach out to some of the chaplain or Christian-based services, such as Ton Taverns or the Cherry Navigators. Those are typically Bible programs or programs where you can talk to a pastor that are in and around the bases. So don't be afraid to use the resources that the base already has in place for you. So if you can't get to the base chaplain or he doesn't have any availability, then follow up with the group like Ton Tavern or the Charity Navigator so that you can get some of that spiritual guidance to help you, one, stand firm in your decision, and two, put yourself on the path to make better decisions in the future. And I hope you understand that during this period where you're separating from this person, you should really be focusing on you. You know, that's not a great time to run out and get into another relationship. You really need to give yourself some clarity and some time. And this is where talking to the base chaplain and some other people will come into handy. One of the next steps is, if you are having a hard time after you have ended this relationship, either standing firm in your decision or you're beginning to self-doubt yourself or your self-esteem is low, then I want you to get some mental health support. So the base offers mental health support. But if you don't feel comfortable getting mental health support on base, then there are some resources that you can use. You can go through Military One Source. They're great for assigning you to a local person who's not on the base that you can talk to and maybe work through some of the issues where you identify how you ended up in a relationship that was full of domestic violence or dealt with domestic abuse, especially if you stayed in the relationship for a while. You're going to need some mental health support in order to put yourself back on a path where you can make sound and clear decisions and keep yourself ultimately safe, because that's the goal. Also, there are tons of social service agencies and nonprofit organizations like Zahara Veterans Network that can give you resources or access to resources that you didn't know that exist within the community. So a lot of times the base will have information that's related to the base, but they may or may not have the information for the local community. So don't be afraid or ashamed to reach out to the local social service agencies or nonprofit agencies to get the support in place that you need to stay away from that person, to stay out of that relationship, and then build yourself back up through the mental health support. So one thing is for sure, anytime you're in a relationship and it is domestically violent or abusive, it's draining. It is emotionally draining. So you need to sit down with someone who can give you the skills and the tools you need to be strong and to move forward and have better relationships in the future. So I just wanted to say, one, we want to prevent having the type of fall that we had last fall, where we lost 3 service members within a very short time frame, back to back to back, and it was based on domestic violence and really based on them not being protected. The other thing is this: the base has programs and services and people that are in place to help with your situation. If you need to go to your chain of command to report what is going on in your domestic violence situation, particularly if you live off base and the person continues to talk to contact you or to try and come over to your home, if they're stalking you out in the community, then you may want to talk to your command about possibly moving on base or getting a room temporarily on base so that you can put some separation between yourself and the other person. What you should never do is stay in a relationship that you know is dangerous for your health and that is not emotionally good to your welfare, because in order to protect and defend our nation, you need to be in a mindset to do that. And any situation that takes your mind or your focus off of the mission has made you complacent. And when you become complacent, you're complacent not just to the mission, but to everyone that's around you. So we want you to stay encouraged, we want you to stay protected, and we want you to know that if you are involved in these type of relationships, there is some support and some services that we can put into place to help you. So now, I hope that you all will share this video, that you will have conversation about it. Talk about what different things you've gone through. What were some tools and steps that you used to separate yourself from domestically violent situations? I want to encourage you to stay away from the conversations that are related to this person did this person did that, and this, that, and the other, and this was 20 years ago, and I'm still impacted by it. Yeah, that's unfortunate. That's why I want you to get the mental health support so that you can move past it, so that you no longer even have to talk about it or deal with it. You can be focused on your future, because at the end of the day, you are a woman service member or veteran. There is no one like you on the face of planet Earth. You are, in fact, a warrior. You are a weapon of mass destruction. And one of the final steps is my 7th step. I said it was 6 steps. I forgot about number 7. Number 7, I want you to legally go out there and get and apply for your concealed weapons permit. And that's all I'm going to say about that. So, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you share it. Give our page a like. Go out to Zahara Veterans Network. Join us at the next membership discussion that we're having on September 19th at 21:30 Eastern Standard Time. We have opened our organization up and we are expanding our membership nationwide, because our goal is to connect women veterans and service members to each other and to resources that exist in the community to help them. But we are on a mission to change the way America sees her woman veteran, and we have got to become strong. We have to build up our numbers, because our next stop is to change what's taking place on Capitol Hill. Come on, women veterans. We don't have time for domestic violence relationship. Anybody got time for that? Have an awesome day. Have a blessed, powerful, and productive work week.